Hey everyone, it's Emily, and it's always really exciting whenever a new console is just about to release. But today I wanted to keep things real and share why I decided not to buy the Switch 2 at launch. And this isn't because I wasn't able to get a pre-order in. I was actually online at the time and just deliberately decided not to even attempt because I knew at the moment the Switch 2 is not for me. And I decided to make this video because I've been seeing two extremes of how people are going about the Switch 2 launch cycle on YouTube. Either there's the boycott camp where they're kind of anti-Nintendo and want nothing to do with the console at all. And there's the other camp that are super hyped and excited for it. Now, I don't think any of these camps are wrong, but I wanted to have a more nuanced approach of why I deliberately decided not to pre-order the Switch 2. I also had a few of you guys ask me whether or not I'm planning to buy the Switch 2 in my comment section, as well as my upcoming Q&A video where I was gathering questions to answer for my 40K sub milestone. But I figured this topic really needed its own dedicated video because there's some things that I'm just not seeing a lot of people talk about online that I think is important to any sort of consumer buying process. So to start off with, I've never actually purchased any console at launch. And I think I usually wait a year or even longer before I finally adopt a new system. And a lot of this is due to just practicality. I have a huge backlog of games behind me that I purchased intentionally to play. And so adopting a new system with its own set of new games just kind of distracts me from playing those games that I want to experience. And most of the new games that are launching with a brand new console are often games that I don't really need to play right on day one. And I tend to favor some of the more niche games that are on the JRPG kind of spectrum of things. And oftentimes those are not huge launch titles with any system. Now looking at the launch window for the Switch 2, there are not a ton of games that I feel like I need to play right away. For example, I'm not really a party game or a racing game type of person. I actually don't own any of the Mario Kart games at all. So while I'm excited for people who are excited for that new version of Mario Kart, it's not something I probably will ever play, to be honest. And the new Donkey Kong game, it looks good. It reminds me a lot of Super Mario Odyssey, which is a game I did enjoy, but it's something that I need to play right away. So I'm okay waiting for that. Same with in the JRPG wheelhouse, which is kind of the genre of choice for me. They have Bravely Default Remastered, which looks like a good game. It looks really cool how they incorporated more mini games using the Switch 2's mouse capabilities and things like that. But the thing is, I already own Bravely Default on the 3DS and it's sitting right back there on my shelves. So I don't really feel the need to pick it up again and play it on the new system, especially if there's not going to be any major story revisions or things like that that would kind of drive me to pick it up again sooner rather than later. Yeah, other than that, there's a lot of third-party games that are coming on the Switch 2, but the thing is, I either own a lot of those third-party games that are coming out on other systems, or they're games that I might be interested in, but I don't necessarily need to play it on the Switch 2 because, again, I have these other systems to play. So the value proposition for me when it comes to the Switch 2 and getting it at launch, it's really not that high just for my individual position here. Now, as a content creator, I definitely could have purchased the Switch 2, made a bunch of videos about it, doing unboxings, some reviews of how it runs certain games, and kind of how it would fit in my new lifestyle if I wanted to be an early adopter of the Switch 2 system. Now, that would have been fine. I could have made it as a tax write-off and some other things, that content creators can do with systems that they review on their channels, but would have felt a little disingenuous if I did that because, as you guys have probably tell, I'm not really excited about the Switch 2 because there's not really any games in it for me yet. And while I definitely could use a Switch 2 as a way to upgrade my library of Switch 1 games, I don't feel like the value proposition and how much it does enhance many of the titles I want to play is really quite there yet. And I'm okay waiting and playing on my Switch OLED that I've had since the Tears of the Kingdom one came out, which wasn't that long ago, to be honest. And if you've seen some of my more recent videos regarding video game ownership and the importance of physical media, many of you know that the Switch 2 is not really looking like a console that is very consumer friendly on that front, especially with how they're kind of subjecting most third-party developers to either go with a high capacity SD card that's holds 64 gigabytes, and the rumor is it costs $15 or $16 a pop for those, which is a pretty large margin taken out of their profit if they want to go on those consoles and release them physically. Versus the game key card, which is much cheaper, but all it's really doing is directing you to the eShop where you do not own these games, and kind of pushing us more towards the digital future. So that's just something that, in principle, I don't really want anything to do with. And while I do want to acknowledge that there are third-party and, of course, first-party games that are available physically on their new SD cards, there's not a high percentage of them that, especially in the launch window, that will be available. Now, this can change down the line. A lot of people are theorizing that when production starts to pick up, there'll be more options and they'll just be cheaper, so they'll be adopted faster. But the thing that really strikes me about people who make this argument that things will get cheaper down the line, so hopefully there'll be more physical games that'll be available, especially through third-party devs and whatnot, is that the Switch 2 has been under production for a long time. They've mentioned how they've stockpiled the stock of the Switch 2 models and to make sure that everyone will get one close to launch who want one. But if they can't do that for the software that they're also trying to promote, there's a little bit of a disconnect here of why haven't they made that production cheaper, and especially give more size options and not just have the 64 gigabyte option as the only size if you want a physical game to release. And I think this is kind of deliberately done because they want to test the waters to see how many people are just going to give in to the digital games that they'll offer. And also the key cards, which are basically digital in disguise. And I think if there's a certain margin or percentage of people who give in to that on their new console, there's no really incentive for them to offer these more expensive cards, even if production-wise, a little bit cheaper. It's still much cheaper for Nintendo and these game publishers only to offer the digital options and kind of have a monopoly on what to price it as. But the thing is when you eliminate physical media from the equation of how to access games on a Nintendo system, and you're only reliant on the eShop itself, how are they going to price these things? It's like, you can argue that maybe key cards, because they are physical items, maybe they'll be cheaper, but the thing is, maybe those won't have a very large distribution. We've been seeing a lot of physical games have a shorter kind of shelf life, right? Because they're not printing that many. They want to kind of see what the demand is and then release games after the initial batch, if there's demand for it. But the thing is, if there's no demand for these key cards, which I have a feeling may be the case, there's no reason to print more of them and just have everyone go to the eShop and only have that pricing option as a way to access these games. So I'm personally not really happy with the direction Nintendo's going for this, and you could argue that other consoles are doing the same thing with PlayStation and Xbox, and it's true. They are, I think, all trying to move us towards digital. And right now, I just don't really want to support a new system that looks like it's going to heavily lean towards only accessing their games through their digital storefronts without any competition. And one of the other things I wanted to address in this video is FOMO. And I've been seeing a lot of people thinking of FOMO buying the Switch 2 because they're afraid that it's only going to get more expensive over time. We've been seeing this with PlayStation and Xbox consoles where the price is only increasing, which is kind of reverse of how it is historically. Often the longer our console's out, the cheaper it's going to get, because they want more people and casual gamers to adopt and be part of their ecosystem by kind of lowering the bar of entry there. I've been seeing a lot of speculation that after this initial batch of Switch 2 consoles release, we're going to see price increases. So kind of given all the recent news and whatnot, I think it's reasonable to expect the Switch 2 might get more expensive. Maybe instead of $450, it's going to be raised to $500 for the console. We've already seen Nintendo increase the price of their accessories and amiibo due to tariffs, is what I think they've been citing as the reason for that. And so I think it's reasonable that the console itself, and maybe even the games, might creep up in price. But the thing with FOMO, especially related to price increases, is that we always kind of forget about the opportunity cost. Because the Switch console as it is, it's $450 plus tax and whatever accessories and games you want to play for it. That is a substantial amount of money. So you add up, right? How much the new Switch 2 launch will be, not to mention how expensive those internal memory SD cards will probably be. Because if the Switch 2 is not going to have a ton of physical games, it's going to rely heavily on the internal storage as well as any extra SD storage you add to it, which seemingly looks really expensive. Now that can, of course, reduce in price over time, but by how much or how soon, we can't really say, right? And if you want the largest capacity, which is 1 terabyte, they have some third-party sellers already trying to sell that for well over $100. So things will add up. So the idea of putting all that money into a new system that I'm not really enthusiastic about, or there's not really new games I want to play day one, doesn't really make sense from a value proposition to be an early adopter of the Switch 2 at all. I'm just, again, talking from my perspective. Someone else who wants to play the new Mario Kart World and all the other kind of new games coming out on day one, and, you know, have families that want to play together on the new system and they're able to afford it, I think that's great. That's a value proposition that makes sense for them. But for me, there's definitely an opportunity cost, because I could definitely use that money for something else that makes more sense for my current lifestyle and circumstances. Because the economy right now is not looking so great. I know a lot of people like to bring up how expensive some of the early console games were, how they were like $100 or something if you adjusted for today's inflation or whatnot. But the thing is that a lot of people's living expenses are much greater than they used to be. It's very difficult to afford a house right now, let alone groceries and other necessities. So definitely the Switch 2 was a luxury item, which I believe one of the people at Nintendo have acknowledged that this is something they're worried about, of the affordability of these luxury goods, especially in today's economy. Now, this first video, I talked about how there are two camps of people talking about the Switch 2. And I'm going to say that I fall somewhere in the middle, because while I'm not buying the Switch 2 at launch, once my value proposition is higher for the new console, I will be more than willing to pay for it, even if it is more expensive down the line. And I think there's some exciting games that Nintendo will have, because they are, of course, a company that are known to have great software and experiences. And so I'm just going to be waiting patiently for when those experiences that I want to play come out. And so I'm patient, waiting a year or even longer of getting this system, because there are plenty of other games that I'm able to access and play on the systems I already have, including the original Switch, which thankfully it looks like games are being printed on the cart for those that I won't have to miss out on. For example, some new upcoming games I'm really looking forward to that are on the Switch 1 as well as the Switch 2. It's the new AI Samia Files game, No Sleep for Kaname Date. So that looks a lot of fun if you're into visual novels and kind of puzzle things. And I'm also really excited for the new Raidu remaster. And while I'll definitely be buying the physical version of the new AI game, Raidu remaster, I'm probably not going to be buying that on the Switch. Probably on the PS5, or maybe even just go with the Steam version. Because whenever I want to buy digital games, I feel more comfortable buying it on my PC platforms, either through GOG or Steam. So I've kind of talked about my thought process of why I decided not to buy the Switch 2 at launch, but it is a system that I would consider buying down the line, just as long as my value proposition kind of aligns and makes sense. So probably whenever there's a new Fire Emblem game or a new Xeno game or a new Zelda game that's not a Warriors kind of spin-off, I would feel more confident in being an adopter of the system and kind of waiting for, you know, all the bugs to work out that often new launch systems tend to have. So I might have the benefit of buying a new upgraded system. Maybe they'll add an OLED screen or have a cool special edition for the Switch 2 that I like to have. So I'm, again, comfortable waiting for the Switch 2 and not in any hurry to buy it, even if it does become more expensive down the line. I'll be at a point in my life, hopefully, that it'll make sense for me to finally buy it. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it either relatable or interesting to hear kind of my perspective on the upcoming Switch 2 launch window. And I also love to hear whether or not you guys plan on buying the Switch 2 at launch or close to launch, or whether or not you decided to wait it out as well. But until my next video, bye guys.